Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bell to Bell. I'm your host, Nick Belsky, and we have a phenomenal show for you folks today. First and foremost, one of the biggest stars, some would argue the biggest star in WWE, made his return at Saturday night's main event. We'll talk about all things Cody Rhodes to lead off today's episode, and then in about 10 minutes, Seth Rollins continues to build his blossoming, whatever you want to call it, his new dangerous alliance alongside Paul Heyman and Bron Breakker. There is now a fourth name and a fourth member to that group. We'll talk about that here later in this episode, and we'll close things out with a fun little discussion topic about who I believe should win Money in the Bank here in about a week and a half. But before we get things kicked off, as always, we like to remind you, if you enjoy our content, to like, share, and subscribe on YouTube at Nick Belsky, or if you prefer an audio platform, you can find us at Bell to Bell on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Let's kick things off with the biggest news from Saturday night's main event, and it is that Cody Rhodes is back. Now, going into Saturday, if you would have told me two things, one of them being that John Cena would insert himself into the World Heavyweight title match between Jey Uso and Logan Paul, and the second thing being that Cody Rhodes would be the one that comes back and kind of shuts it down and makes sure that the strap stays on Jey Uso's shoulder, I would have looked at you and said, this feels like a little bit of a fantasy booking situation. This feels like you want to see that happen, but it doesn't feel like something that they've signaled is going to happen. I mean, look at Jey Uso, for example. He had this matchup at Saturday night's main event on the calendar against Logan Paul. He also then has Gunther on the Monday Night Raw after Money in the Bank. And then, as if that wasn't enough, he had Seth Rollins waiting in the wings saying, hey, after Gunther, I got next. By the way, it felt like Jey Uso's calendar has already been planned out. It didn't feel like there was room for John Cena and his farewell tour to butt in. And coincidentally, it's the exact opposite. One 25, 30-second backstage segment before Jey Uso goes out to the ring with John Cena looking at him and saying, I'm taking this title away. But how fitting would it be if when I do that, that title is on the shoulder of a, quote, YouTuber? Now, we will circle back to that comment here in a couple minutes, but that small little interaction immediately had a payoff in the main event. John Cena comes out, tries to screw over Jey Uso. Uso probably would have had Logan Paul for the 1, 2, 3, but John Cena comes out and pulls the referee out of the ring and tries to make his prophecy a reality. Now, the one thing that John Cena didn't count on is the return of Cody Rhodes, and that's where we'll get into this. Cody Rhodes saves the day in his return. He saves his former tag team partner, Jey Uso, and he helps him retain the World Heavyweight title. Not only does he do that, but he sets up a date for Money in the Bank, a tag team matchup, Cody Rhodes and main event Jey Uso against John Cena and Logan Paul. Hollywood versus, right now, the tried and true WWE babyfaces. I'm excited for the matchup. Does it make a lot of sense? Not entirely. Like I mentioned, Jey Uso is pretty booked up as the World Heavyweight Champion. Cody Rhodes coming back and going right after John Cena, that makes a lot of sense. But on the other side of things, John Cena and Logan Paul as a collective unit doesn't make the most sense, and I don't think it's going to be the most harmonious of relationships, especially because of what John Cena said to Jey Uso before that main event. He called Logan Paul a quote-unquote YouTuber. Now, he's not wrong. That is how Logan Paul came up. He was a YouTuber first, and now he is kind of parlayed that into multiple different things. Obviously, his business ventures like Prime. Obviously, he's trying to be taken more seriously as a WWE superstar, saying all year long, since the press conference for Raw on Netflix before the first of the year, that he is going to become a full-time wrestler for WWE. He said it on the Raw recap a few weeks back, and he's been saying that basically to anybody who will hear him with a WWE tilted camera or microphone. So the fact that John Cena and his introduction into this entire discussion, this entire storyline, was calling Logan Paul a YouTuber, something tells me that at least Paul should take exception to that, and it might create a little bit of friction between those two. Meanwhile, you look at Jay and Cody, that reunion is something that I think a lot of people are excited for. They were tag team champions back in, I believe it was 2023, which was essentially the birthplace of Yeet with Jay Uso. It was the post PLE presser in Pittsburgh, mind you, at Fastlane whenever Cody Rhodes and Jey Uso won the WWE tag team titles. So we have this tag team matchup set for Money in the Bank. We have Cody Rhodes back on WWE television for the very first time since he lost the title back at WrestleMania 41, which brings up a question that I think I had been pondering, but hadn't really had a reason to ask it on this platform, simply because Cody Rhodes hadn't returned since losing the belt at WrestleMania 41. We hadn't heard from him. So the question that I want to ask, and I'd love to know your opinion, let me know in the comment section below, does Cody Rhodes have to be the one that takes the belt off of John Cena? Because personally, I don't believe John Cena is going to reach the end of this farewell tour and walk off in the sunset like he's been prophesizing for the last couple of weeks. I think that John Cena eventually is going to drop that title before 2025 is over. And the question becomes, does it have to be Cody Rhodes to take it away? Does it have to be Cody that, quote unquote, saves wrestling? I don't think it does. It honestly shouldn't be, for the simple fact that he dethroned Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 40. He ended the longest reigning modern era world championship reign at WrestleMania 40. That was bestowed upon him. We talk in wrestling about these moments. We talk in wrestling about these endorsements, if you will, from WWE to certain wrestlers. One of the big ones in the history of the entire organization, of the entire industry, was who was going to beat the streak, who was going to end Undertaker's undefeated streak. That went to Brock Lesnar. And whether you believe it was the right call or not, it launched Brock Lesnar to a 5-year run as one of the biggest faces in WWE. He was already that. He was already one of the most marketable names. He was already one of the biggest box office attractions that they had, but that sent him to a different level. Cody Rhodes beating Roman Reigns and taking the belt away from him after 1,316 days was another one of these instances. And now, whoever takes the belt off of John Cena, whoever ends the record-breaking 17th title reign of John Cena, is going to be put in a similar spotlight. So in my opinion, no, it shouldn't be Cody Rhodes. Now, the problem with that is there's not many other options, right? Cody is clearly and obviously the best option that is currently available to WWE on Friday Night SmackDown. Randy Orton makes some sense, but are you really going to pass the torch from John Cena to Randy Orton, who's not that far behind him as far as longevity is concerned? Probably not. There's Roman Reigns, who is a possibility, and I think all of us would be excited to see one last matchup between John Cena and Roman Reigns. But again, you're then giving it to the guy who carried the baton from 2020 to 2024. Does he really need it? No. I think that honor, I think that world title victory, I think that moment should go to somebody who has yet to be a world champion, somebody who could then take it and catapult themselves into a 3, 4, maybe even 5-year run as one of the top names in WWE. Cody Rhodes doesn't need to beat John Cena to have that run. He beat Roman Reigns, and he's put in the work over the last 3 years since returning to WWE that he doesn't quite need that. You know who does? Maybe a Sami Zayn. Maybe an LA Knight. And honestly, LA Knight is one of my favorites. The only poison pill in that is he is, believe it or not, 42 years old. But he could run that from 42 to 47. We would not be at all surprised if he continued to have the support of the WWE universe along the way. So I like LA Knight because he is on WWE's Friday Night Smackdown right now. And I think he still has enough of a backing that everybody would be A-okay with LA Knight being the one to dethrone John Cena. Sami Zayn, to me, is probably the best non-already main event option. Sami Zayn is main event, but he isn't a mainstay there, right? Even after he beat Gunther for the Intercontinental Championship, he has still been kind of in that secondary level, percolating. How fitting would it be that Sami Zayn reaches the mountaintop for the very first time, taking down the man who has been at the mountaintop more than anybody else in the history of wrestling? So my vote goes to Sami Zayn, but I also like LA Knight. I also don't hate the idea of it being Logan Paul, and that being the thing that if it happens early enough in the year, which again, we're already to June, but if it happens maybe around post SummerSlam, Logan Paul beating John Cena is the thing that snaps him back to the reality. And we get Fruity Pebbles John Cena once again for the last 2-3 months of 2025 in this farewell tour. So I think that could also be an option, especially because the whole YouTuber comment, there has to be another shoe to drop from that one. If it's not, then it's a missed opportunity. And really, it's just kind of John Cena. If he one-offed that comment, that's John Cena not paying attention to the product, because Logan Paul for 5 months now has been getting upset at anybody who's just called him a YouTuber and not an actual wrestler. But in my eyes, it doesn't have to be Cody Rhodes. Would it make sense? Yes. But I don't think it has to be Cody Rhodes. And honestly, I would prefer it not be. I would prefer that it be Sami Zayn. Speaking of Sami Zayn, he is currently entangled with another big name on Monday Night Raw, and that is Seth freaking Rollins and Rollins' crew of, well, I guess you could call them goons, right? I guess you could call them goons, but Seth Rollins just continues to have tricks up his sleeve left and right. He is a visionary, after all. He is a revolutionary, after all, and he is, in case you need reminding, an architect. And what we're seeing right now is Seth Rollins build a unit of destroyers to help quench his hunger for power. And we saw another layer of that be added at Saturday night's main event. It is Rollins and Bron Breakker getting the victory over Sami Zayn and CM Punk. But it wasn't by altruistic means, I should say. It was due to the fact that big Bronson Reed returns to WWE, takes out CM Punk by absolutely crushing him through the barricade, eventually hits him with a tsunami for his troubles, and aligning himself with Seth Rollins, Bron Breakker, and Paul Heyman. This is the first time that we have seen Bronson Reed since War Games, where he absolutely tore the house down with a huge tsunami from the top of the cages. So much so that it put him on the shelf because he busted his ankle up in a very disgusting way. He was in the middle of a huge push in 2024. He had the Braun Strowman feud where it was monster versus monster. It was last man standing. And he came out standing tall of that feud. And that was that first moment that you said, okay, Bronson Reed is ascending the ranks in WWE. And then he has the feud against Seth Rollins, which was then referenced on Monday Night Raw, where he comes in one night and he absolutely obliterates Rollins. Rollins goes back on the shelf and returns a couple of months later with full health, and ensues a feud alongside Bronson Reed. And then it was War Games, where he was a hired gun for Bloodline 2.0. But Bronson Reed had himself a good run in 2024. That unfortunate injury halted all of his momentum. And the fortunate thing here is when he comes back and he aligns himself with, right now, in my opinion, probably the most exciting thing that WWE has going on its main roster, which is Seth Rollins, Paul Heyman, Bron Breakker, and their alliance and what they're trying to do. You throw Bronson Reed into that mix, that is going to allow him to pick up immediately where he left off back in November at Survivor Series War Games. So I like it a lot. Now, there is one little part of this that I find very interesting. And Pat McAfee, in a one-off comment, kind of alluded to it as well. When Seth Rollins comes out, in all white, mind you, and he's flanked by two monsters, Bronson Reed and Bron Breakker, the Bron brothers, in all black with dark shades and Paul Heyman behind all of them, it kind of reminds me of the Shield. And in this era where we're seeing Bloodline 2.0, Bloodline 3.0, how many different iterations of the Judgment Day are we going to see before they actually just change everything? Is this the beginning? And they have to be careful here because Bloodline is something that they've been throwing around willy-nilly. Judgment Day is not as serious, but the Shield and the use of the moniker the Shield is very well protected in WWE. So I don't think they will ever call them the Shield, but it certainly feels like Seth Rollins, the architect, is trying to rebuild something that loosely resembles the group that he came into WWE with a decade plus ago. I mean, the entire emphasis of this group is, quote, the future of the industry. And was that not what everybody was saying about Roman Reigns, Dean Ambrose, and Seth Rollins back in the mid-2010s? It is. So now, Rollins, who was the destructor of that first iteration, at now, presumably, the height of his powers, is saying, I know what'll work. I know what will make us dominant. I will recreate my version in my image, Shield 2.0. Now, they're not going to come out in tactical gear. They're going to come out and be themselves. They're going to come out and do everything Seth Rollins, the architect, the visionary, wants them to do. You have the powerhouse, which is Bronson Reed. Back in the olden days, it was Roman Reigns. Now, is Bronson Reed the caliber of Roman Reigns? No, but very rarely is the sequel ever as good as the original. And I think we're going to run into that a little bit here. And that's why I also think they're going to refrain from actually calling it Shield 2.0. But you have the powerhouse in Bronson Reed. And you have a lunatic in Bron Breakker. Now, it's not as cheesy. It's not as, on the nose as the lunatic fringe Dean Ambrose. But you look at Bron Breakker, you look at his mannerisms, you watch him in the ring. Yeah, he's a psychopath. He's a little crazy. He's a little out there. He is a Steiner, for God's sakes. So you have the lunatic, you have the powerhouse, and you have the architect. It feels like it's Shield 2.0. And now it's as strong as any faction in WWE, and it is probably the most exciting thing that WWE has going forward. And by the way, on top of that, not only does Seth Rollins get the victory on Saturday night's main event alongside Bron Breakker, but he then gets the victory in the main event of Monday Night Raw, and he's heading to Money in the Bank, a ladder match that initially catapulted him into stardom back going into WrestleMania 31. One of the most historic, one of the most memorable Money in the Bank cash-ins is at the hands of Seth Rollins. And for the second time in his career, he heads into that matchup looking to change the face of the industry and looking to change the future, not just of himself, but of the three gentlemen that are alongside him in Paul Heyman, Bron Breakker, and Bronson Reed. He wants power, and the Money in the Bank briefcase would give him exactly that. All the power he desires going into the latter half of 2025. Let's close out this episode talking a little bit more about that Money in the Bank briefcase because we are a little over a week away. We still have 4 contestants, 2 on the women's side, 2 on the men's side that have yet to be determined. But let's have a little thought example here. Let's have a little, I don't know what we want to call this. Let's have a little fun here with this. June 7th. Is it June 7th or June 9th? Let's look this up. When is Money in the Bank? Because my notes say one thing. It's June 7th, so I'm not sure why I put June 9th on the graphic, but disregard the graphic, just listen to me. June 7th, 2025, next Saturday, will be the Money in the Bank PLE emanating from the Intuit Dome in Los Angeles, California. We already mentioned that we're going to get John Cena and Logan Paul against Cody Rhodes and the World Heavyweight Champion main event, Jey Uso. But what we also will have is 2 ladder matches to determine the women's and the men's Money in the Bank winners. Last year, we had Drew McIntyre win the men's Money in the Bank, and by the end of the night, that was already burned through. He tried to take it from Damian Priest, CM Punk in one of many different times, screwed over Drew McIntyre, and in the process, screwed over Seth Rollins as well. And the men's Money in the Bank briefcase was no more after that night. Tiffany Stratton won on the women's side, and that was actually well executed as she held on to it for months and months and months before cashing in on Nia Jax, and she is still the WWE Women's World Champion. So now I want to look at these 2 matchups, men's and women's, and tell you who I believe should win the Money in the Bank briefcase. Let me know in the comment section your selection and who you would like to see walk away with the briefcase on June 7th. In the men's side of things, as of this recording, we have Penta, Seth Rollins, as mentioned earlier, Solo Sikoa, which is an interesting addition, and L.A. Knight. So the question becomes, who should win the men's Money in the Bank briefcase? Seth Rollins would be interesting, obviously, for everything we discussed earlier. He's trying to shape the future of the industry, and the easiest way to do that is to have him holding the Money in the Bank briefcase. Not to mention the fact that it was so entertaining the last time he held on to it. Why not replicate that in 2025? Yeah, that would be amazing. LA Knight with the Money in the Bank briefcase. Could you imagine the pop whenever LA Knight would come out to cash in? It would be enormous. One of the biggest that we have seen in years. So that could be interesting. Solo Sikoa, I'm liking what I'm seeing, but I don't think we've seen enough for me to say, yeah, I'd like to see him win the Money in the Bank briefcase. I want to see more of him with JC Mateo, Jeff Cobb. He's still Jeff Cobb to me. And Jacob Fatu and what's all going to happen there. I don't necessarily want to see him come away with the briefcase next Saturday. Penta would be great because everything Penta's done so far has been great. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go off the board, at least off the board that is currently presented to us. And I'm going to say one person that should win the Money in the Bank briefcase is Carmelo Hayes. He was the first round pick to SmackDown in the 2024 WWE draft, and they really haven't followed up much on it. They certainly didn't throughout the calendar year of 2024. The only things that we saw that were mildly worthy of his talents was the best of 7 series with Andrade, and even that was ruined by the fact that the 7th match was tossed out by LA Knight because he was the special guest referee, and he just could not contain himself, and he could not call it straight, and he could not hold his composure as both people were accidentally or on purpose getting physical with him. So that was the only thing they utilized Carmelo for in 2024. I think we all know there is many more things that they can utilize him for. Hence, the reason he was the Andre the Giant Battle Royal winner going into WrestleMania on WrestleMania weekend. That was great. It's a nice moment. It's a nice feather in the cap, but you need to follow it up. Now he's linked in with The Miz, and he's doing stuff with Aleister Black, and it's all entertaining. And every time he has a match, well, it's entertaining simply because he can hang in ring with absolutely anyone. But I think it's time that they seriously start pushing Carmelo Hayes up the card, especially on Friday Night SmackDown, which right now is John Cena, Cody Rhodes, and Randy Orton. That's the cream of the crop. That's the top of the line. That's the bar right now on Friday Night SmackDown. And then really, it is a dogfight for the top of that second tier. You could put Damian Priest into that. You could put Drew McIntyre into that, but it seems like he's going to be taking some time off because, well, if you think about the matches he's been in over the past calendar year, yeah, it makes sense. His body has been taking a beating. Carmelo Hayes, I think, would fit perfectly in that second tier. Him and LA Knight and Damian Priest. You need one heel in that group, and I think Carmelo Hayes could be that. So I think on the men's side, it should be Carmelo Hayes. And that brings us to the women's side, which to me is actually a little bit more cut and dry, a little bit simpler to parcel out based on what we've seen so far. Alexa Bliss, Giulia, Roxanne Perez, and Rhea Ripley have all qualified as of this recording. I think the one obvious one is Rhea Ripley definitely does not need this. I don't think we need to see mommy in the bank. I just don't. I think somebody who has been able to basically beat anybody that she gets in the ring with, who did not even, I believe, take the pinfall at WrestleMania. I don't think she needs money in the bank. And I don't think her cashing in, although again, similar to LA Knight, the pop whenever Rhea Ripley's music hits while she has the money in the bank briefcase would be enormous. It just doesn't make sense with her. She doesn't really need it. She can just run the gauntlet of any other contenders, get to the top of the line very quickly, and then dismantle whoever the champion is. No shade to Tiffany Stratton or Io Sky, but anytime Rhea Ripley is in the ring, I think you have to have at least a 45% chance or a 45% thought process of she could win this thing. It's 50-50, probably honestly 50-50 at least. Meanwhile, Alexa Bliss, I don't know what the plan is with her. She's doing some weird side stuff with Charlotte Flair outside of qualifying for Money in the Bank. So I'm not sure her winning feels like something that could happen here in the next 10 days. And that leaves the two rookies right now on the board. I don't think anybody off the board I feel confident enough to put in there like I did with Carmelo Hayes. But the two on the board right now, the two rookies, Roxanne Perez on Monday Night Raw and Giulia on Friday Night SmackDown. With Roxanne, she has everything going on with Finn Balor and the Judgment Day. I don't know how that's going to end. It feels like Finn Balor is pulling the strings and Roxanne is putting on an Oscar-worthy performance to try to dismantle the group from the inside out. But either way, it feels like adding a Money in the Bank briefcase to that entire situation is not something that we're going to see happen. It feels like they have enough steam there to get Roxanne over on Monday Night Raw alongside Finn Balor, and they can move on and continue to build over on Mondays. That leaves Giulia, somebody who WWE has a lot of faith in, who WWE believes could be one of the faces of the women's division. Somebody who was one of the faces of the NXT women's division alongside Stephanie Vaquer over the last handful of months. Let's not forget, a calendar year ago, Giulia wasn't in WWE. She came to WWE, I think it was around a year ago, actually, and she quickly became the top of NXT, the face of NXT, and now she's already on the main roster. I think Giulia winning would be an early statement that this is not just another NXT call-up. This is somebody who is going to be battling it out with Io Sky, battling it out with Tiffany Stratton, battling it out with Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill and Rhea Ripley to be one of the faces of what is quickly becoming a very, very stacked women's division in WWE. We have talked ad nauseum about how much talent is in the NXT women's division. Now is when that starts to permeate into the main roster with Roxanne on Monday Night Raw, doing her thing with Finn Balor, doing her thing with the Judgment Day, and Giulia, who in my opinion should be the 2025 women's Money in the Bank winner. Now, outside of that, the one thing I will say, I want to see long runs with both briefcases. Whoever wins, if it's Carmelo and Giulia, who I would love to see, if it is Seth Rollins, if it is LA Knight, if it is Rhea Ripley, I don't want to see a same night cash in. We saw it last year. I don't think it's worth it. I want to see a couple long runs from this year's Mr. and Mrs. Money in the Bank. I think that is something that we would all benefit from, especially considering the world champions that we currently have with Io Sky and Tiffany Stratton, two that I think that anytime you put them in the ring to defend their titles are going to put on an absolute show. And then on the men's side of things, you have Jey Uso, who has a lot going on already. Thinking about Money in the Bank on top of that throughout all of this process would add just another layer of drama. And then John Cena. I mean, could you imagine John Cena, the last real champion, worried about a Money in the Bank cash in? I think we could get a lot out of that as well. So I want to see long runs from both. On the women's side, I'd love to see it be Giulia. On the men's side, I think it should be Carmelo Hayes. But that's going to do it for this episode of Bell to Bell. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. Remember, if you enjoy this content, to like, share, and subscribe on YouTube at Nick Belsky, or if you prefer audio versions, you can find us at Bell to Bell on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts. That's it for this one. We'll see you guys next time.